Hi, my name is Scott Thomas. Welcome to Higher Level Editing. These videos are not only for editors, they're also for producers who use Avid Media Composer. I'm going to show you some of the tricks and techniques I use in large, complex, multi-user projects that will bring your editing skills or producing skills up to a higher level. Let's get started. Timeline tricks. Now this is going to be quite a short video. Well, I always say that, it probably isn't. But there's lots of things you can do to make life a lot easier when you're working with a complex timeline like this. At the moment I have 10 layers of video and I have 44 mono audio layers in here. The problem is that we can't see them on one screen. Now what happens is you have these selected down here because you've been working on these tracks here. You start working up and you think, right, I'm just going to take this bit out or cut this bit out. And as you take it out, you don't realize that down the bottom, you've also taken out the audio. And unfortunately, we have Control Z to take everything back again. But how many times do you make an edit at the top end, work all the way down, and then you come back down and you go, I've destroyed what's down below. And you have to go back and fix it. So that's one of the things we're going to look at today. Now, obviously these are mics, and just being on track 10 or track 22, this is not an easy way of working. So what we want to do is rename the tracks. Now you can right click on the track and rename it. So we'll call this, let's say it's George. And George happens to be in the group of people which we'll call A. This might be Angela, and she might be in the B group, and so on. But the most efficient way of working is to have everybody using the same template. So templates in the old-fashioned way could be done using one that you build up and then everybody copies. So if I go over to here, you'll see that I have already done all these names. But what happens if you forget to create that template from the beginning? It's a pain because you have to go and make a new sequence out of the template and then edit into that sequence to create a new one so you've got all the names. What Avid have introduced, which is absolutely fantastic, is a thing called sequence template. Now it has been around a little while. If we go into settings over here, you'll see under sequence template there are a couple of templates in here. Now if you open it, this is the default. You start off with just one video track and two audio tracks. And you can add to these, of course. You can add all the video tracks, add all the audio tracks. You can also change the start timecode. In the US, they always start timecode at the beginning of a sequence on 01. In the UK, it starts at 10 hours. And then you go in and rename all these tracks. So that could be VO, that could be interview, and so on. And then you build up your template. Now, I've already made one here, which is called Higher Level Editing, 10 video tracks, 45 mono tracks. And you can see here that I've named all of the players all the way down to track 32. So we've got 32 potential tracks of microphone, and then the rest are all music and effects. Now I know that the bottom two need to be reverb, so I'm just going to change those two. So I know that those two are reverb and I can see them instantly. You just save that and it's now created. If I just open it again, you'll see that it's not in italics, which means it's saved, and down the bottom we now have reverb. So let's cancel that. The sequence template has been around for a little while, but this new trick that I'm going to show you here is just wonderful. And thank you, Avid, for doing this. I have my sequence here. It does have all the tracks, but none of them are named. So what I want to do is to apply the template that I made earlier into these tracks. Right click on the sequence. And up here you have Create Sequence Template or Apply Sequence Template. And you'll see from the drop down I have the default template, or I have my HLE 10 video 45 mono. Hit that and bang, all the names are populated in exactly the way I want it to be. Isn't that amazing? I love that. So if I'm working on an episode that only includes people from the A group, I don't need to see those who are in the B or C groups. So this is how you hide the tracks that you don't want to see. Deselect everything, which is Shift Control A. This is where these timeline views are absolutely vital. I want to see Wendy, I want to see Vince, but I don't want to see Zed, Wes, Victor or Vicky. So what we're going to do is select all the ones we don't want to see. So if I just select all the B's and C's all the way up the timeline, and we want the hosts. On this occasion there was no guest, so we don't want the guest, and I don't want ADR, and I want to see everything else. So I have selected the ones I want to hide. Then you go back to the fast menu here, bottom left of the timeline. Click that, and down at show track you then go hide selected, or Control or Command Shift H. When you do that, bang. Now we only have all the A's. The other ones are hidden. Now a little caveat here. What I should have done before that is turn on the sync locks. It's very important when you're working on projects like this that you use this sync lock. But if I actually go back and go to standard, you will notice the ones I have selected do not have sync locks on. So before you do that selection, hit the sync lock. Then we can go and do show track, Control Shift H, and there we have our timeline, which is shorter, but not short enough to see every track without scrolling up and down. So how can we do that? Right. So there are certain tracks here that I don't need to see full height because I'm not going to use them. For example, burnt in timecode track at the top, probably V9, any of these here which are right at the top which are affecting the tracks below I don't need to see. These are also spares, so it's from chirons down, V4, V3, V2, V1. I want to see those quite big, but I don't want to see those too big. So now let's go down. What else do I not need? Right, probably the reverb can be reduced in size, and let's have a look here. Don't need host 4, there was no host 4, and voiceover again I don't need to be that big. So now I can take these and reduce these in size, and the simple way of doing that is making sure you're on the timeline is to go Control and K, and the only ones that are selected will reduce in size here. Now be careful you don't have anything in the source window that is also selected, because that will reduce that track as well. So we're going to reduce these down by Control K, and it'll only go to a certain size, and you'll see that's as small as we can get. So I still can't quite get everything on here. And also that might be a little too small if we are doing some video work or some reverb work, but let's stick with that for now. That's reduced it, we're almost on a full screen. Right, let's do the next one. So we're going to deselect everything, which is Shift Control A. Now what I want to do is just select the microphones to be large, because I'm not going to work on music. So again, I can just select all the music tracks and Control K to reduce the height of those. And now you can see that last click, everything is now on the timeline. There's no scrolling up and down, there's no up and down scroll bar on the right hand side. I can see everything in one go, which is great. That's what I want to do. But I'm going to make the music even smaller, down to about there, because I actually want, again, just shift and drag down there to deselect them if you want. I want to make these mics slightly bigger of the contestants. Hosts are okay, but I'm going to make these ones bigger. So I've selected those, and Control L expands them. So let's expand them big enough to see where we're working, but without making the timeline scroll up and down. That is perfect. So now I want to save that. You'll notice down here, this is the timeline view menu. So I originally chose standard. I've changed that configuration, and so it's italicized, meaning that it's not saved. Click the drop down. You have a choice down here. These are the ones which are already saved. To save a new timeline view, click the Save As button. And I'm going to call this O1 Mics A. That is now this view. And if we look over on the other monitor, timeline views, and here's my new one, Mics A. Now here's a really good habit to get into. I want to save everything. So I'm going File and Save Settings. Now this is really important because that will now save this settings when I come back to it later on. If I was on a bin, if I had a bin selected that was open and I went File, Save As, this bin is already saved because it's auto-saved, but it doesn't give me save settings. I have always made sure I'm in the settings bin when I make a change to my settings, because that way I know the settings are changed. The other one is my user profile up here. Every now and again, just go update user profile. No new settings were added to your user profile, and that means I did save it correctly when I did the save earlier on Save Settings. Now I moved this window, so I'm just going to restore to saved, and then we come back again, exactly as we had it before. But what you'll notice is that we still have our timeline arranged just the way we want it. So now I might want to make another version of my timeline view which expands the music tracks. So first of all, I'm going to reduce the size of the mics, Control K, let's take those right down in size. I'm going to hold down the shift button and drag up, which clears those, and then select the music effects ones. And now I'm going to go Control L until this expands out to that size. Now I have all my music tracks expanded, and I need to save that. So very simple, we're going to go Save As 02 Music. And that's now saved. If I flick back, I can go into mics, and if I flick the other way, I can go into music. So I use 2 or 3 of these timeline views constantly. So if I go to all tracks, again, if I look on here, this is all my tracks being available. None of them are hidden. So I can easily go back to that. I can go into my mics, and I can go into my music. So those are the 3 that I will probably use during the edit session that I'm working on now. So what I want to do is to put those onto a keyboard shortcut, and this is how you do it. First of all, you find your keyboard over here that you're using, which is this one, and I've decided I'm going to put it onto P, the square left brackets, and the square right brackets. Those are 3 which I find I don't use normally when I'm editing, and they're kind of spare, but I don't want to do a shift key over there because this takes 2 hands on that side of the keyboard, takes me away from the mouse. So I'm going to put these on here. Now you'll notice that all tracks is already on there, but these 2 I'm going to change. So what you need to do is open the control palette, which is Control or Command 3. Here's your command palette. In the previous episode we talked about workspaces, and we mapped our workspaces onto these. So what we're looking for here is under More. This is TV 1, 2, 3, 4. This is timeline view. So if you do the drop down here, you can see I have mics, A, that's the one I want, and I also have music. So then you can drag from here with button to button reassignment selected, not menu to button to button, drag that onto where you want it to go, and there we go. So now when I close this, I can close my keyboard now. I'm going to go and back into my settings bin and go File, Save Settings. Go back onto my timeline, because it'll only work when you've selected the timeline. And now if I hit P, it gives me all the tracks. And then if I go left bracket, it gives me my mics A, as you see down here. If I hit my right hand square bracket, it goes to music. So I can quickly toggle between the three. Now it's pretty easy to notice that as I toggle between these, on my all tracks selection, you can see that everything is in bright red, which is denoting that it's offline. Now this is really useful if you're working in a project just to spot the odd effect. Well, in this case, the whole timeline is offline. So if you want to show the offline media alert on the mics timeline view, you come down to the fast menu and you select clip color. So if I open this here, you can see that offline is deselected. So I'm going to select that and click OK, and the timeline will turn red. There we go. The other thing that will happen is mics A.1 appears and it's in italics. So I want to resave that. So I click Save As, and it gives me the name that I've already had with the .1. So the simple thing to do, I want to keep the name, is just to delete the .1, and it goes back to 01 mics A. I'll click OK, and it asks me to confirm that I want to replace that one. So the answer is yes, I do. So now I have 01 mics A, not in italics, and I can just flip between the two. There's my music, which doesn't have the offline media. And if I go back to the square bracket on the left, this is a rather annoying little bug. It doesn't work. It doesn't happen every time, but it certainly happens a lot of times. So I'm going to open my keyboard again. The keyboard shortcut on the left bracket has gone back to the default and lost my mic setting. So I have to open the command palette again, and you'll notice that TV2, Timeline View 2, has gone to none. Now, by updating my timeline view, this has changed it. So I now need to go and reselect it in there. I don't need to re-drag it back up because it has corrected it on my keyboard. And then I can close down, go back to the timeline, and now I can press my left-hand bracket and it works. So that's a little bug that you have to watch out with. It has been like that for quite a while on Avid, I think since the beginning of this new 2020 style of software. Reducing the amount of visible tracks and using timeline views is a great way to focus on what you need to see. But there is one problem you need to be aware of. If you are editing by doing overwrites or lifts, i.e. non-time destructive work, you will not be affecting any of the tracks that you cannot see. So if I lift out this section of the timeline using just the mic channels that I can see, I go to all tracks, you will see that it hasn't taken out anything on the other tracks, despite the fact that they are selected. So you're leaving audio there. You have to be careful about that when you're doing selective audio tracks. These do not get affected by it. I'll just undo that, bring my tracks back. Let's go back into mics, and there we have it. So the final thing I want to show you today is how to use dummy timecode. Now this is a great method of keeping notes in shape. You'll receive timecode notes from a producer, and it'll tell you want to make the changes at 4 minutes 26 seconds and then another at 5 minutes 25. And the old-fashioned way I used to do was to work from the back forward, so that if you were cutting anything out, you still had the right timecode reference. Now, there is a great way of working on this, and this is to use dummy timecode. So what I'm going to do is create a dummy audio layer which will have timecode in it. Not burnt-in timecode, which you can see at the top here, but on the bottom. I'm going to create a new track, Control U, which will appear at the bottom here. And I'm just going to rename that TCREF, timecode ref. And I'm going to make sure the track is clear, and I'm also going to sync lock it. That's very important. So how do you create dummy timecode? Well, we use the old-fashioned capture tool, which is Control 7, Command 7. So when you open this up, the settings have to be absolutely right to do this. First of all, you need to have a name for the deck. So even though it's empty, offline or turned off, we do want to associate it with the deck, and we'll call it dummy timecode. As you can see, I've already made that up. That's the name of my deck, even though there isn't one. I need to select my bin that I'm going to. I've only got a few open, but Scott Essentials is the one I want to use. And up here, there is no video coming in, and I have Windows Mixer here, but that doesn't matter either. You want to select one audio channel. That's all, just A1 is fine. Up here we have the record button, delete, we also have the capture button, and we also have the toggle source. You need to be in tape mode, and then you need to change from this capture log mode from capture to log. So now we want to enter the start time code, which is going to be 1 hour, and we'll make it an hour and 10 minutes long. That should be enough for the early cuts. So 210:00:00. That gives us an hour and 10 duration. You can give it a name called dummy TC and hit the log button. Bang. When I come over to this side, you'll see I've created a clip called dummy timecode. We can close the capture tool, and we just drag this timecode into the source window, and it's there. Now you won't see anything. If we look at the source side, there's no media on this audio clip. It's simply for data, which is why it's a dummy timecode. But this dummy timecode starts at 1 hour, which is the same timecode as our master. And now I can just put this onto my A45 track. So let's make sure that we connect it to the right track and put it down the bottom here. Now this timecode track is going to run synchronously with the master timecode if you set it up right. And we'll check that by going to the tracking information menu, dropping down and selecting A45. And there we can see, if I change my bottom tracking information menu to my sequence, timecode, timecode 1, master, you'll see it's the same timecode. Now the advantage of having this on the top here is that you can go to a code. So let's say we have a note at 5:34:10. I can enter that and my cursor will go to the right place on the timeline of 5:34:10. Now just to prove how effective this works, so if I take out a chunk of the timeline, what's going to happen is the time code will cut accordingly. So I've cut 7.5 minutes out of the sequence and the master time code is now 10 minutes 30. But the dummy time code is showing 18 minutes, which will match the time code of any notes from the previous version. I've got a note at 32:10:00. If I hit that, I go to 32:10 on my original cut, even though I've taken a chunk out of the master, and now the time code is not referring back to that note. It takes a bit of practice to get this dummy timecode right, but once you do it, it's well worthwhile. One little trick at the end, of course, is to make sure that that track is reduced in size, because you don't need to work on it. It'll just sit down there, and then we can save that as my mic A again. Replace. And that's it for now. Hopefully that will help you manage to wrangle your timeline into some kind of order, make it a bit more visible, and quickly shift between the various modes and use your timecode reference when you get notes coming in. As I say, these are all tricks that you need to use when you're working on a very complex project. Simple stuff, simple projects, only a few tracks. You don't need to do it. If you're working in collaboration, getting notes from people, multiple editors working on various bits of the sequence, you need to know these little tricks because it'll speed up your editing infinitely. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this. See you for the next one.